Moore?
Here.
Pedro Reyes?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Oh, you're much more familiar with the area. Okay, thank you. We have the minutes. Move the minutes. Is there a second? Second. Okay, there. I do have a correction on the minutes. And the correction, I think it should reflect on page 3, after financial reports, that's when we went out to closed session and then came back and did the appeal items. So since the minutes are supposed to reflect chronological sequence of events, that'd be the one correction. And then also in the minutes on page 6, when we were talking about the San Joaquin County Office of Education, there was some confusion and incorrect information provided. And the issue was the penalty was $257,652. And the question was, does the $79,000 that came in as interest earned, does that count towards the $257,000? And the response was provided, yeah, it could be applied. And the correct response is it should not be applied. The interest earned is interest earned on the account that's due back to the accounts, and the $257,000 is actually a penalty for money that the state had to pay. So there are two distinct issues. However, Senator Lowenthal has requested that we put this item up for conversation again for an action item, and we'll be doing so for next month to go on the record and have a full discussion on it. So you just wanted to correct that. So the minutes have been moved and second. Would you accept those as corrections? Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I have it.
I need to abstain. I wasn't here for the meeting. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. And at your request last month, we also held on to the charter school issue that we'll be bringing up next month. Okay. And I apologize. Were there any public statements to the minutes? Thank you. Executive officer report, and the civil, if you would, there's a lot of financial information that you include in your report at some point. We've all had a chance to read them, and unless members have specific questions on them, or there's some specific piece that you want to bring our attention to, I think we can move it along further if we streamline that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Do that. So if I can direct your attention to tab 3, page 14. Just two items I wanted to share tonight, actually related to the joint agency workshop. We actually have a follow-up session tomorrow, Wednesday, July.
We don't have to touch it. You have nothing.
Sorry.
Tab 3.
It's on your desk.
Second.
Yes. Okay, great. So tab 3, again, is just to reiterate two issues or two items tonight, is the joint agency workshop. We'll have a second joint agency workshop tomorrow, and we'll actually be co-presenting with the Division of State Architect and the Department of Education. And that workshop will be held tomorrow at the Ziggurat Building in West Sacramento between 1 and 4. So far, we've actually had 35 participants scheduled to participate in the venue, and that would be obviously in person and online. And the topics we're going to cover is Department of Education will cover the site approval. Division of State Architect will also introduce a High Performance Incentive Grants Program, then update on DSA reviews. And OPSC will also share with the High Performance Incentive Grant Program, modernization, eligibility, and funding, and site acquisition funding. So those are the topics that we're going to share with the stakeholders and school districts, and we're hoping that we'll have a lot of participation and look forward to that tomorrow. Also, project information worksheet. This month in the financial reports, we actually feature on page 72 and 74C some new kind of optics or graphics about the information we collect on the project information worksheet. Again, this is something we splashed out last month. It was just one piece of that data point, but now we've actually broken down to bond sources and how many classrooms we build and the square footages and the type of facilities that this bond program is providing, specifically for new construction. Again, the purpose is to get more data related to the accessibility of the program and how successful the program is. And then also, we would like to share those graphics and optics not only to our membership here, but also to the general taxpayers of the state of California to see what their bonds are actually providing. So that's good information that we wanted to share with the board as well.
Thank you.
With that, I open up to any questions.
Mr. Harvey?
You know, I was quite impressed with what you just alluded to, that project information worksheet and the data that it can generate. You mentioned that what we have before us only touches on new construction. Is this something you could do for some of our other bond programs, like modernization, for example? I mean, it's so valuable for what we saw in new construction. It seems to me it might have applicability in some of these other areas.
Yeah, it would be great to be able to expand and collect more information on the other programs and what exactly it is providing. So, again, I know it was really centrally focused around new construction, but I think there is the possibility if the board would like to expand in other areas. And again, that speaks to the optics and the actual progress we're making in funding school projects. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this, on the Executive Officer's report? Okay. We now move to the appeal items, and you should know that the CERES Unified Stanislaus School District issue has been pulled. All right. Let me clear the issue. Folks are waiting around for the CERES Unified Stanislaus School District issue has been pulled, and the Black Oak Mine Unified El Dorado has also been pulled. That should see if there can be an administrative resolution to that. So just to adjust the agenda, okay? Let's go to consent, and if we could incorporate in the consent items 11 and 12.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion for consent in items 11 and 12. There's been second. Any questions or comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Lyle raises his hands and he rushes to the front. That is rushing for Lyle.
Yeah, this is as good as it gets. Thank you. Good afternoon. Lyle Smoot, Los Angeles Unified School District. Since you included item 12 in here, I felt the necessity to rush right up here and talk about the general site allowance. We've seen you redo this general site allowance for, 5 years in a row, whatever, and every year it has to come back. It creates a lot of work for OPSC, a lot of potential issues for school districts, a lot of work for the board. Sometimes you've had to come back and make secondary apportionments to cover that. We would hope that you would just make that general site allowance a permanent thing. There's a lot of discussion about why it needs to be a 1 year at a time, but that discussion revolves around the AB 127 adjustment. This really has nothing to do with the AB 127 adjustment, since that's a base grant discussion, and if there was an adjustment warranted based on the base grant, the board has the ability to adjust the base grant more than this amount if they wanted to. So we just don't see any reason to keep doing it 1 year at a time. We'd ask you to just make it a permanent adjustment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we it's part of the consent motion is to have it for the 1 year. So unless somebody wants to pull it off the consent for full discussion, we'll go with the 1 year. Sure.
I'm just wondering from staff if there's a rationale for doing it on a year-to-year basis as opposed to a permanent adjustment.
The original regulations were approved annually to give staff some time to do a more full, in-depth analysis of the new construction grant adjustment. That hasn't happened, and that's why the board has been approving it annually since 2006.
And the reason why we haven't been able to look into the adjustment itself?
There's been several attempts to have that discussion in terms of the grant adequacy. There were some reports that were presented to the board that were not adopted, but that was all the progress that's been made in that field.
The board has not taken the action to adopt the recommendations that resulted from that conversation. Senator Lowenthal.
We're really talking about the new construction funds now, right? And we're almost out of those anyway. So why don't we just make it permanent instead of coming back, since we're almost out, we're almost out of the funds anyway until whatever we find in the future. So I would pull this item from the consent.
We'll pull it from consent and have a conversation on this then. Okay? So we have then, would you revise your motion? Yes. So consent item plus item 11. And with this, do we have a second motion? Okay with that? Okay.
Senator Lowenthal?
Aye.
Senator Runner? Aye. Assemblymember Brownlee? Aye. Assemblymember Buchanan? Aye. Assemblymember Hagman? Aye. Scott Harvey?
Aye.
Kathleen Moore?
Aye.
Pedro Reyes?
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you.
Tab 5 is the,
Pardon?
are we moving on to tab 5?
Yes.
Okay. Tab 5 is just, again, the status of the funds that we've been dispersing. On page 61 is basically a summary of the funds that we have dispersed in the program since we've gone, since the freeze, the hold on the PMIV. So the state has been successful in selling bonds, and we've actually been reporting out in each category how much the funds have been dispersed on a monthly basis. And just to capsize that, on page 61, the summary that we've actually provided this month, that we just met just a few weeks ago. So the update we have to share with the board is we dispersed $81.9 million in the last few weeks. So again, that's the update we're providing to the board. And on page 63 is just to highlight those projects that are on the time limit on fund release. Again, just for purposes of condensing the report, here are the projects that are in schedule in July that they don't perfect. Money will definitely come back to the program. So again, the rest is a summary chart of there's about $294 million that are on the time clock. And so with that, again, notice to those districts that have those time limits set, you need to secure contracts and come in with your fund release request. So with that, I would open it up to any questions.
Any questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Excellent.
Tab 6 is the status of funds. Again, this is a summary of your bond authority that's available for the program. In Proposition 1D, we actually did have some activity this month. We wanted to share that we actually have projects that we, within new construction, that we actually switched the bond source. And modernization, we actually provided $48.5 million, which represents 15 mod projects, 1 high-performance project, and 5 charter school projects. So in summary, for Proposition 1D, we're providing $76.7 million in unfunded approvals, which represent 23 projects. And the middle category, which represents Proposition 55, but voters authorized $10 billion. We actually are showing unfunded approvals of $56.9 million this month. That represents 3 projects. Actually, I have a charter school project that's also being posted as well. And so with that, in total, $55.5 million. That represents 3 projects in Proposition 55. And Proposition 47, likewise, we're posting some amounts in new construction. That represents 2 project activity, also in charter schools. So we're actually providing in total for the school facility program $136.5 million in the last few weeks. So it's a pretty significant drawdown to the program. And then on the following page, on page 65, we actually are showing some another project that's being on the unfunded approval list, again switching bond source, and that represents a hardship project in a hardship category. So that represents 29 projects that we're moving forward over the last few weeks. And there's no activity for the emergency repair program, and we'll bring back an action item in August.
Okay.
And I just wanted to highlight really quickly on some of the new charts or new information that we added on page 72. And again, this is just reflective of the project information worksheet and the other data sets that we have. Again, to highlight to the board, new schools versus additions. Again, the chart represents 567 PIW information that we received related to new construction projects. The pie just summarizes that out of that project data, there's 34.6% or 196 projects that actually were new schools, and 248 projects, or 43.7%, represents classrooms only. And the other sector in that pie is 123 project represents classroom and subsidiary facilities. So again, if you map that out essentially side by side, you can see the other pie chart actually reflects that most of the money are being spent on new construction projects. So that's a good illustration there. The next illustration on tab 70 or page 73 is just a breakdown of all the project costs that are being reported throughout the state. Again, it's just to highlight to the board where the money is being spent in the program, again, specifically for the 3 years.
So Lowenthal?
Nope.
You're good? Okay.
There's no modernization when you're talking.
No, this is just new construction only. Yeah.
I just want to be clear.
And then also, on page 74, it's just to highlight the number of plans that are being reused. This is, again, information that school districts are providing us, and so we're just, again, highlighting specifically out of that data that we have that 85% represents probably standalone plans, and 15% represents reusing of plans in our data set.
Okay. Thank you.
And 74A, 74B, and 74C, it's just an illustration broken down by bond source. So the first illustration, I think we shared somewhat of a graphic illustration last month. This represents Proposition 1D. We actually have built over 3,700 facilities representing classrooms, and 68 of those facilities represent multipurpose room. Again, you can read the chart, standalone, cafeteria, what have you. And this is, again, reflective of Proposition 1D. And then the lower portion of the chart represents the square footage allotments for those projects in classrooms. So we've actually had 5 million projects represented, 5 million in square footage that was built for the classrooms. And over 400,000 represents multipurpose room. Again, the illustration should share how much square footage that we built in Proposition 1D.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if you want me to cover the rest of the program, but here's just the information and how it's used. Open up to any questions?
Comments or questions from board members? Mr. Hagman?
I was going to say this, from where you started 6 months ago to where you're doing now, these reports are very visible, very clean looking, so thank you, whoever's working on that in your IT department, because it comes out very readable. Thanks.
Yeah, we got a great department there. Thanks.
Ms. Brownlee?
Yeah, I too, it's interesting to look at these charts and without really drilling down at all, but and looking at the type of facilities just right off the bat, it seems a little disturbing to me, I don't know how others feel about it, to have the other category as the second largest component in terms of building, ahead of gyms and libraries and restrooms and multipurpose rooms and et cetera. So the asterisk says other includes staff rooms and conference rooms and resource rooms. So I guess resource rooms are for special education, I presume. It doesn't say it's special education, but I presume that it is. Anyway, just an observation that, looking down the road, that's something I think we might want to revisit.
And bifurcate it a little bit more so we get a better sense of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that if I had issued these bonds, this would be the outcome I was looking for. Yes, on the classrooms, obviously, but for the other category to be the second highest expenditure, I'm not sure that's what we intended.
I think Mr. Hagman brought up that point last month, and with his concern as well.
I'd make one comment to that in that I think the project information worksheet indicates these broad categories. It doesn't drill down further into such things as, you don't see on here, special education spaces, you don't see pull-out spaces, you don't see things that might not be a classroom but also might not be, also aren't clearly a multipurpose and such. And so there could be, and without seeing all the data and statistics, there could be a lot of things that are very educationally appropriate that fall into the other category. And because we have limited the categories to which they self-report in, we don't get to see that picture, because we see a lot of that coming through the Department of Education.
It's 6.7% of the total square footage. So when you look at it as a percentage, I would think it's not unlikely to see 6.7% 7% built in terms of staff rooms or your resource rooms or that sort of, that square footage. But I will say that I think this, the more data we have, the better it is, especially as we want to plan for future bonds and everything. It's important to know where the money's going and how it's being used and, have those questions answered.
Point, yeah. Okay, Ms. Moore?
Another interesting statistic to me would be proportionality. For every classroom or every student that we're building, how much of a cafeteria did they get? And how much of a library did they get? Because all we get to see are the gross numbers, but we proportionally don't know if that is meeting the service needs of the students that are in the classrooms that are being provided here. So to me, that's another interesting data point that as we go forward in a new bond measure, we would certainly want to know, are we underbuilding for those spaces that are important in schools as well, and in terms of meeting what the classroom ratio is. And I hope that we'll be able to glean that from the statistics at some point.
Thank you. Mr. Hagman?
Since I haven't built a school, I'm sure there's a lot of people here have. I'm sure there's some kind of standards that they have, right? I mean, you have to get it approved through the state architects and your consultants, so I'm not so much as trouble because I'm sure there's parking lots and there's open space and there's playgrounds and all that kind of stuff has to be facilitated in this overall construction cost. That's probably the other. But if someone wanted to build something not with a normal school, don't we have a check and balance in the process before you release the funds and you review the plans and you say, this doesn't fit? I mean, am I being asked to now learn the site to understand these numbers, or is that already built into the system? I'm assuming that's already built into the system here.
Well, this category represents the entire project that the school built. I mean, the locals built. So it may include state grants and also their local funds. So, and then the fact that we don't have that specificity to drill down in those other cost categories or other areas that are being built, I think we could add or enhance in those program areas to get a little bit more precise information as far as this is a special education resource. I mean, whatever that specific category is, we can definitely drill down to get more specific and enhance the data set that we are collecting.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, move to appeals. Item 7.
Tab 7, beginning with page 75, includes an appeal for the ESPARTO Unified School District. The district is basically appealing three things. One is to change the unfunded approval from Proposition 47 funding to Proposition 1D. Two is to change their unfunded approval date from March 15, 2011 to September 23, 2009. And lastly, to be able to be funded from Proposition 1D as soon as funding becomes available. This district received an unfunded approval back in September 23, 2009 for a total of $1.2 million state share. This was to add a music classroom, multi-purpose room, teacher workroom, and toilets on an existing school site. As part of the application submittal process, the district on 2 occasions did check a box stating that they will be initiating and enforcing an LCP program. Based on that certification, staff matched that application with Proposition 47 funding in order to be able to give the district grants for those purposes. In the fall of 2010, the district submitted a certification to participate in the priorities and funding round. In order to do so, they had to submit a certification acknowledging that the failure to submit 5005, which is a fund release request within 90 days, would result in the project being rescinded without further board action. A rescinded application would revert back to the unfunded list at the bottom of the unfunded list with a March 15, 2011 unfunded approval date. Based on the certification, the board awarded an apportionment, but because the district did not initiate and enforce an LCP, they were unable to come in and meet the 90-day requirements of submitting a fund release request. The statute requires an LCP for projects that are funded either Proposition 47 or 55. Districts that are required to initiate and enforce an LCP from either of those funds do get an additional grant if we fund them from those funds. And the purpose of the LCP is to ensure the appropriate compliance with certain labor laws for school construction, such as appropriate prevailing wage payments for construction work. The board has previously approved fund source switching. Most recently, at the February 23, 2011 meeting, it was from the Belmont Redwood Shores Elementary School District. We switched from Proposition 55 to Proposition 1D. The staff recommends that the board does allow the district to switch from Proposition 47 to 1D. We do currently have cash in Proposition 1D funding. However, the district is also requesting to revert back to the September 23, 2009 unfunded approval date. Because the district did submit the certification acknowledging that if they don't meet the 90-day timeline, they will get a new unfunded approval date. And because this is a regulation requirement, staff is denying that request, and we recommend that the board adopt option 1, which is to approve the fund switch but deny the change to the unfunded approval date. There's also a couple of other options. Option 2 would be to grant the district's request to switch funds and to allow the date change from March 15th to September 23rd, 2009. And the third option is to deny the district's request. With that, again, staff is recommending that the board approve option 1, to approve the bond source switch, but not approve the date change. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is the district here? Representatives from the district available? You want to step forward? In case folks have any questions? Board members have any questions? No? Mr. Diaz, you're up there. You have some issues? Sir?
My name is Tim Brock, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business Services. ESPARTO Unified School District is a small school district in western Yolo County. We have less than 1,100 students in a K-12 environment. We feel that the analysis by your staff is fair. We feel that the option 1 recommendation is fair based upon our error. We, being a small school district, we don't have facility staff per se. We contract out that work, and basically our consultant submitted those forms for our signature, didn't catch it, so we realized that an error was made, and are grateful that you would consider our request and their recommendation.
Mr. Bronner.
Well, I just have a question. If we did move it back to September of 2009, does that mean we get building sooner?
Actually, the building has already been completed. We had taken a bridge loan out. We're paying interest only right now, awaiting funding, and, basically we'll do the best we can with what we have.
Thank you.
If I could clarify that, Mr. Chair, the project is currently 527th on the unfunded list. If the board grants the September 23, 2009 unfunded approval date, they would be moved up to 36th place, which would be, they would be basically moving ahead of $1.1 billion with the projects.
Okay. Mr. Diaz.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you about this item. As you know, this board discussed the DIR regulations being suspended. We had a long discussion in this body, and staff did a lot of excellent work dealing with trying to eliminate some of the confusion caused by the rescission of those regs. Well, this is the second time that a district comes to this board asking for some type of forgiveness for incorrectly stating that they are going to initiate and enforce a labor compliance program, indicating that, of course, this is the Belmont Shores example was not an isolated incident, that there might be others. So we may look at that discussion that we had on the DIR regs and say it was all for nothing, because now what we're seeing is this huge loophole that is being opened up. And the message that perhaps we're sending with what's happening here, I understand that there's issues. The school has already been built. Labor compliance was not done. So we're not sure what actually occurred on that particular project. But the message that is being sent out with these approvals is that there's a way to circumvent the law and if you're misstating that you actually have a labor compliance program and don't fulfill those requirements, that you will be forgiven. So I understand that there is option one. We're supportive of that. We feel that the district needs to go back to the end of the line and wait for our funding, but also would ask respectfully that this board direct staff to work with the Department of Industrial Relations, to work with us, to try to figure out a way to stop this from occurring again, to send a direct message to districts that they have to, if they're applying and they represent that they will have a labor compliance program based on what the bond requirements are, that they will fulfill those requirements. So that's what we're asking for this day.
I have Senator Lowenthal and then Mr. Hagman. But before we do that, I think districts and the organizations that represent districts need to be aware that our ability to move funding around is diminished every day as money goes out. And so we have done this in the past, but had this come a year from now or 2 years from now, our ability to do that is going to not be there, and the district is going to be on the hook because you made a commitment. But Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what the recommendation is. You're saying that you would be supportive of option one with an amendment to option one? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would be happy.
It's because I agree we're not, you're fine with denying the district's request to change the unfunded approval. You're saying we should grant the request to change the bond authority plus do something else by...
Absolutely.
But you're not saying deny the shifting of the funds?
I don't think it's a good idea to do that. I mean, obviously, that's what our request would be for districts to get a strong message from this body.
Right.
That would send a strong message. I understand that it's sort of a very heavy-handed
approach. Strong message. Yep. But what you're saying is that's not... What you want to do is to ensure that we figure out a mechanism so this doesn't continue to occur.
Yes, sir.
That's really what you're saying. So I'd be very interested in what you're saying, and so I would like to see if we can get the wording down on something like that. I think it'd be very helpful to us.
I have Mr. Hagman, then Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, for all practical purposes here, we do have a knowledge of where we send our money. I'm hoping you are staying aware of that with your members, but there should be some kind of checkoff process during the design while we're building it. And I've seen much smaller projects have protests when they're not there. And so I'm wondering, is that something that your school district became aware of at the early beginning, or no one even said anything until it was all over and it just popped up out of the blue?
What happened, we didn't find out about it until after the 5004s were submitted, incorrectly checking the labor compliance box. And we submitted the 5005 for the fund release, and that's when we found out about it. So.
And that was after the project's already been completed.
Right.
But the 5004 gets submitted ahead of the project, and we, as an agency or department, would have a list of those projects. We should be able to at least verify that something's in place, even though you're certified as a school district. But what we're finding out is school districts aren't general contractors, and they don't have a lot of the expertise and a lot of the experience behind it, especially the smaller ones who do multiple projects. Same thing on smaller cities. You may build 4 or 5 municipal buildings over a lifetime of a staff cycle there. And so maybe that's something we can look at, Chair, in the future, is how our staff can augment or at least have some kind of periodic checks. I know we're just kind of distributing the funds, but we should have someone saying, at the beginning, middle, and end, are you complying with the standards so we don't have these problems after the fact?
Ms. Buchanan.
First of all, I'm just curious, who is your consultant that filled out these forms?
It was an architect.
It was an architect that filled out the forms? This is where I am. I think that the staff's recommendation allows you to not have to dig into general fund revenues to repay these bonds, but also recognizes that there needs to be some kind of consequence, and by putting you down further in the line doesn't harm other districts, and I think strikes a happy balance between making you whole. However, as we've dealt with other material inaccuracies, it always kind of drives me nuts when districts sign things to say that they're going to be under a construction contract and then they're not for a year. Or in this case, where you signed 2 letters saying you had a labor compliance program and you didn't. It wasn't just 1 letter, it was 2 letters saying you had a labor compliance program and they weren't in place. So what I would ask staff is this. I don't think it needs to be part of the motion, but and I am prepared to go ahead and make a motion to accept staff's recommendation, but I would ask staff that, if it's possible, and you can respond to me, to send a letter out to those projects that are currently under the bonds that require the labor compliance programs, to send a letter out to those districts reminding them that to receive funding, they have to have an LCP in place, and that if they do not have the LCP in place, that they will risk receiving final funding on their project because it will be picked up in an audit. And, if someone's in the middle of a project, you can still bring a labor compliance firm in at that point in time, and because many of them will go back and they'll take a look at what's been paid and they'll be able to verify, because, the people who monitor this monitor it by sometimes it may be going out and talking to workers on the job, but they also monitor it by looking at records. So if there's some way that we could send this out, just to remind them that you signed this, it needs to be in place, and at the time of audit, if it's not, that they are putting future fund receipts in jeopardy, because, I agree with our chair. It's worked out for Redwood Shores, or Belmont Redwood Shores. It's gonna work out for you. But a district may come to us 6 or 12 months from now, and they're not going to get funds. So what?
We actually do 2 things. When we actually do provide unfunded approval and the board takes an action, we actually do send a letter out, kind of an after-board letter to the district, kind of remind them, you've been allocated an unfunded approval for this proposition. So we put school district duly noted. And the second thing we do is when they come in and request the funds on the fund release, we actually start instituting this requirement. They have to show us that they actually have a labor compliance program if they're requesting funds specifically from that proposition.
Right.
So this is how this issue came up, is because they competed for priorities of funding, and at that time they were going to submit their labor compliance verification, and they didn't have it. So that's how we've actually instituted a step before it becomes an audit issue. So we're trying to save everybody a lot of grief on the front end and make sure we do those practices.
So if you're doing that, or if they're, it probably wouldn't even hurt to send out another letter just saying we've had 2 instances, if it's practical, because, there's going to be some point in time where this board is going to be looking at a project and we're going to have to say, I'm sorry, and given the fact that I don't see the state's economy just going like this in the near future, that could have a huge impact on the general fund.
That's a motion to approve.
Motion is to...
Addition, I will second.
Right.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Brownlee had it.
Well, I was just going to speak to what I thought Ms. Buchanan was making a motion on, and to just incorporate into the motion either Ms. Buchanan's suggestions or other suggestions that staff may have to come back to us at the next meeting of how we can indeed close any loophole that we inadvertently may have created to ensure that this just doesn't happen again, and that be part of the motion, and have staff to come back with some suggestions about how we can do it.
Well, can we maybe make the motion to accept option 1 and then direct staff?
I was going to ask, we bifurcate that, because one is approval of the district's request with certain parameters, and then the other one, direction to staff.
As a district, and I don't, and like I said, it's, when you have it on forms, when people sign it, it seems like if you're signing something, you ought to know what you're signing, with all due respect. And so I don't know if more needs to be done or not, but if there's a way of making those districts who are in the middle of these projects aware, that would be great.
So I think if I have a motion from Ms. Buchanan, second by Mr. Harvey, to accept staff's option 1 recommendation, or staff's recommendation number 1, and then we'll go to the other item, if we can, okay?
Senator Lowenthal?
Aye.
Senator Runner? Aye. Assemblymember Brownlee? Aye. Assemblymember Buchanan? Aye. Assemblymember Hagman? Aye. Scott Harvey?
Aye.
Kathleen Moore?
Aye.
Pedro Reyes?
Aye.
Carries.
Okay, now the second motion, or the second issue, this is a staff, for staff to provide a notification. We know the universe of folks who are receiving Prop 47 funds, so we should be submitting, notwithstanding your current system, because clearly your current system has cracks. So
Well,
if we could
only to the extent that people, when they sign it,
increase the enhanced information that they are at risk, so somehow send a notice out, and if we can impose on the associations out there to also include this in the bulletin, I'm looking at cash, that this has been an issue and that our ability to swap funding source is diminished every day. So if somebody's that jeopardy, they will be in a lot more jeopardy later on.
yeah. And do we need a motion, or do we just need direction to staff to come back?
Yeah, I don't think you'll need a...
Staff has, pardon?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe you'll need a motion.
No, I think
Staff
it's-
come back with some recommendations, and then the board can look at
I
them.
think we're asking, I'm looking at the whole board, and I think the whole board says, has an agreement.
Well, I mean, I think it was just sort of disregarding what I suggested, which was for staff to also come back with any other recommendations
absolutely.
that they may have.
Yes, so to enhance the information.
I thought he said just to do what you had asked.
Oh,
No.
I interpret as being some additional enhancements to what we're doing.
Whatever we can do to enhance the sharing of information that they're at risk. Okay?
Next month.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Harvey?
A question to staff, where are we on our intelligence regarding DIR and the regulations?
Well, we know they put out some proposed regulations, and we actually just received that advance copy this week. So we're looking through the regulations. We would actually have we were hoping for more interaction with DIR, but we'll be reviewing those regulations to see how they impact the program. So, and that's on a different issue.
Mr. Harvey, you were asking about the regulations that the board recently adopted in terms of the grace period. Okay. Those, we did meet with the Office of Administrative Law. There was some concerns about those regulations and the authority behind the regulations. We're continuing to have those discussions, and we do plan on bringing back an item before the board to have further discussion on those regulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 8 has been pulled. Item 9 has been pulled. We're on item 10.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Rick Asbell. I'm a operations manager with Fiscal Services. If you please go to stamp page 96.
Okay.
The item before you is to present the Orange County Department of Education's appeal to close an SAB project, Community School Number 8, to costs incurred and to recognize certain disallowed costs from an OPSC review as eligible expenditures. In October 2005, the board approved a 100% state-funded separate design grant for this project. As a reminder, financial hardship LEAs may ask for design and/or site acquisition prior to coming in for a construction grant. Per statute, once an LEA receives a design grant, they have 18 months to meet substantial progress requirements or the project will be rescinded. In June of 2007, Orange County did not meet substantial progress on this project and the board approved a request for an 18-month extension. Orange County was still unable to meet the requirements and requested to close the project to costs incurred in December of 2008. After the OPSC's project review was completed, the OPSC sent its finding. Orange County disagrees with OPSC's findings and is appealing the findings. So as specified in regulation, site, design, and construction apportionments are intended for specific purposes. For example, design apportionments are to be used for design, engineering, and other pre-construction costs. Some uses of site apportionments include site acquisition, DTSC fees, site hazardous removal, and site relocation assistance. Additionally, as a part of site apportionments, site other allowances are made for appraisals, escrows, surveys, sites testing, CDE review, and approvals. As previously stated, for this particular project, Orange County received a design-only apportionment and did not request or receive a separate apportionment for site acquisition. So at issue are three types of disallowed expenditures for this project. The first being legal fees for the purchase of a surplus school site. These funds in the amount of $7,600 do not meet the intent of a design apportionment. Had Orange County received a separate apportionment for site acquisition, the legal fees would have been an allowable expenditure using grants provided by the apportionment for site other costs. Orange County could have applied for site acquisition grant by obtaining a CDE contingent site approval letter and a preliminary appraisal. The second issue concerns custodial and janitorial related services. These fees in the amount of $3,000 were for services to specifically create a maintenance staffing evaluation report. This type of expenditure is considered to be an operational and/or maintenance cost and are not allowed under the SFP. The third issue are legal fees for the request for proposals and qualification assessment selection of a construction manager. Now, at this stage, keep in mind we're still in the design stage. At this stage in the project, there were no DSA-approved plans, no site acquired, and thus the costs related to construction management in the amount of approximately $33,000 are premature. Additionally, legal fees for the request for proposals and qualification assessment selection of the CM, absent documentation which establishes such costs are necessary to the design of the approved project, are not related to the design grant apportionment. The expenditure payment was for legal fees for a law firm to perform a qualification assessment selection process to select possible CMs. Now, in its appeal, Orange County relies on Education Code 17072.35, which contains broad language describing how new construction grants may be used. However, this provision does not specifically address when an applicant has only approval for design and not site acquisition. SFP Regulation Section 1859.81.1 provides an alternative that allows an applicant to separately come in for design and site acquisition apportionment. Remember, the board only approved and Orange County only requested funds for design and not site acquisition. So in summary, since the Orange County applied only for design and not for site acquisition purposes, only those expenditures related to design and not site acquisition are eligible. Custodial costs or evaluations which are related to general overhead or administrative costs are not allowable costs, nor are legal fees related to a request for a proposal for the selection of a CM at the design phase when adequate documentation is not provided to demonstrate costs or for pre-construction services. The board and OPSC are charged with ensuring that the SOP is administered consistently with statutes and regulations. In this case, the Orange County went beyond the intent of the design grant. Based on the information presented, staff has administratively denied the district's request. Now, there is an option for Orange County moving forward to make some of the disallowed costs allowable after the grant reduction occurs on this particular project and this project is closed. Orange County may reapply under a new project number for another separate design and site acquisition grant or full grant. The site-related legal fees would be allowable under the site grant, which is under the new project, and the CM costs would be allowed under the construction or full grant, but would be considered a district contribution and would reduce the Orange County's financial hardship apportionment for the new project. Under no scenarios would the janitorial costs be allowed. So in closing, allowing Orange County to use design grants or legal fees related to site acquisition and creating an RFP for CM selection and for maintenance-related overhead costs would set a negative precedent. It is important to maintain standards and the intent of the separate design grant. And we have laid out the board options at the bottom of page 99. One is to take no action, which will allow staff's administrative action to stand. Number two would be to grant the district's appeal. I'm open to any questions.
So the staff's recommendation is to take no action?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Hagan.
Mr. Chair, I believe there probably will be a presentation here by Orange County, but just
if you could have Orange County folks come forward, please.
Just a real quick question as far as general thing. They have this bigger chunk of money that they haven't spent. Looking at the timeline, they've been sitting on it since 2005, so 6 years it's been not being utilized. Is this something that, since we're talking 50 grand out of 1-point-something million, should we not at least get that 1.4 whatever back? And is there a process once they, because it's been in dispute, so I'm sure it's been in dispute for a while now.
Well, once the board takes action on what are the allowable and disallowable costs, we'll bring another item back to the board that basically lays out how much money is coming back to the state for that original portion.
I understand, and this is not really about this issue. It's about the process in general. When you have a school district come to you and say, hey, we're not going to do our job. We want to give you back some of the money, but now you're having a dispute over what's allowable, what's not allowable. And understand that their earning interest is like we would have set an account, but we have a lot of projects that are being unfunded at this point because they're waiting for a list of the money to come in or whatever the case may be, or may not be ready. If we could somehow at least agree upon amount, which looks like 95% of it or 99% of the money is agreed upon to come back to us because they're not going to be utilized, and that should be done way back a year ago or whatever they decide they're not going to do it. And then you could have this more analytical about the cost and stuff later, because they were really talking about the $45,000. This in general, is there a process for that?
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying, but I know we create an accounting record for each of the projects, and so, I mean, we can actually institute that change, but yeah, each project stands alone and it has its own accounting record, so it would be an account journal entry, and then we'll follow up with a subsequent item, yeah.
Okay. Okay, district.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Benkert. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Business Services for the Orange County Department of Education. And Andrea Sullivan is our Director of Facilities and Maintenance and Operations. Orange County is ready to return $1.5 million, as we have been for some time now. It's really just $43,000 that's at stake. We believe that certain expenditures have been improperly categorized during the audit. And these expenditures are all pre-construction services, which are eligible for funding that the OCD received. Although the dollars at issue may be not significant to the state, we believe as custodians of scarce state resources, we need to do our due diligence prior to requesting the site allocation money to ensure that the site is appropriate for our community school students. The state is paying interest on bond funds, this $1.5 million that are sitting idle and available and unavailable to other districts that could use the funds. Disallowing the expenses in Orange County Department of Education's appeal encourages districts to prematurely request millions of dollars in site acquisition funds from the state. There are larger policy issues at stake that are precedent-setting, and many county offices have interest and express support of the Orange County Department of Education in this area.
Okay.
And Andrea Sullivan will be happy to answer more specific questions regarding the expenditures in question.
Okay. Ms. Moore?
I have a question of staff, and that is, if this project had not been rescinded and taken to through completion, would these costs that have been allowed?
For item number 1, which is the legal fees, that would be a yes for the site acquisition. Item number 2 would be a no. There's no scenario in which we would allow that. Number 3, assuming that it did go to a full grant and it did perfect, the project did perfect, we would allow number 3.
In my mind, if these are allowable costs that if the project had gone forward, and I think that the district had full intention of doing that until they ran up to the time that they could no longer move forward with the project and went down to costs incurred. And I think that if a project, if these were allowable costs, we're hanging it up on a technicality that they didn't come in, perhaps, and ask for the site acquisition funding. And I don't think that the district would, if the district had known that they were going to rescind and these weren't going to be allowed, I bet they would have come in for that. And we would have held out even more money from the state school building program that other people could have utilized for that. I think that they were prudent, that these are allowable costs, that we as a board, by getting into the weeds of this, actually, I think are questioning how school districts manage their projects and saying that we don't think that certain types of inquiry should go before other types of inquiry, which actually I somewhat disagree with. I think that the district started out with their project, started out on all the different issues that a district has to deal with when they began a project, and went down the due diligence of that until a time that they determined they weren't going to move forward with the project. So I think it sets a bad precedent of the board kind of getting into the weeds, $40,000 worth of weeds, it's easy in hindsight to say, maybe you should have come in for the site acquisition at a certain point in this and done those funds, when the district never proceeded through the project with the thought that they're going to rescind it at some point. So I'm prepared to move items 1 and 3 for approval.
Mr. Lowenthal, Senator Lowenthal, you have your...
Yeah, I tend to support that. I was just concerned about a very small part, and that's I think there's $3,000 of the maintenance and operations, which may have been inappropriately used. The one about the staffing, on determining M&O staffing levels. So I would be...
I'm not proposing that item.
You're not proposing that?
I'm not.
So it's without that item?
Correct.
Fine, then I'm supportive.
Ms. Buchanan.
I was sympathetic when you came in and met with me, but I do have some questions because, it's sometimes you have small school districts that don't really understand how programs work. But, when I talked about this further, how many planning grants have you received?
For this particular project?
No, for how many hardship financial planning grants for site acquisition have you received?
We've had many projects, and we still have eligibility to come in for more projects.
Okay. Because what I've been told, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you've had a total of 16 planning grants. Of those, only 3 have gone forward. So the state has spent money on 13 planning grants for you to look into finding sites, and basically no sites have materialized out of those. So that's money that the state spent. It's lost opportunity cost, and it wasn't where you got 2 or 3 planning grants and half of them didn't work out. 13 of the 16 planning grants that you received, and this is financial hardship money, has been just sunk money, lost, right?
So it's come out of our eligibility.
Right, but still, that tells me you've had 16 planning grants, so theoretically, you should know how the program works in terms of what's covered as a site acquisition cost and what's covered under pre-construction or construction cost.
If I may address that particular question related to the legal fees for site acquisition, in those processes, we had included those same services and expenses, and they had been allowed previously, and so we were consistent with our process in doing that. Now, to speak to the number of applications that were not able to move forward for various reasons since OCDE started in the program, there have been many where we have gotten far enough that we were, looking at the site similar to this project, and without support from the community for the school there, we ultimately had to.
I understand that with this one, but I myself would not be hiring a construction contractor if I didn't own land and couldn't move forward. And I can understand it happening in a situation where someone is not experienced, but where you've had 16 planning grants and only 3 of them have moved forward, it's not where you don't have experience in terms of what's covered under a planning grant and what's not covered. And then, and I believe you have state hardship money also that's right now that's sitting in the bank pending the construction of a staff parking lot, correct? No?
There was an ancillary facility that related to an older item that the board took up in 2002. There was actually an allowance for for Orange County to not contribute the certificate of participation in order to build their ancillary facility. And so, in essence, that money was created a special reserve fund in order for them to build that established parking lot, although it goes against the structure of the statute in which they should contribute certificate of participation. Although we understand it was a 2002 decision, however, I think the premise of it is we continuously review Orange County's Office of Education Financial Hardship Fund, and there are some of these residual funds that are still part of that.
So how much is in this fund?
There's about $4 million.
$4 million.
Right. And right.
I'm just $4 million. I'm sorry. What fund is?
In Fund 40, is that correct?
Yeah.
For parking lots?
No. What Lisa was referring to back in, I believe the board item was in 2002, is the COE was allowed to issue a certificate of participation in order to build an administrative building. And they were only going to occupy a portion of that building and lease out the rest of the building, and use those lease revenue in order to pay for all the lease payments, so it would be a self-sustaining project. And any excess revenue beyond what was needed for the payments would be used for their SAP projects. And to date, I think what Lisa was getting to is that even though they've collected over, I believe, $18.6 million in that lease revenue, none of that revenue has been contributed to any SAP projects.
If this was information that was germane to this project, it should be in the agenda item for all to read. It seems that there is information that only some members of the board have, or some members, and I think that's inappropriate when you're discussing an item in fairness to the district or the County Office of Education that is before the board. I'm having a hard time following what the issue is because you just brought it up.
Ditto.
I think that's what was given us.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you just passed this out on our desks. I haven't had a chance to read it. I presume what you're saying is relevant to this document, and I'm not sure what you're trying to justify or how this relates to what the item is before us.
Well, I think
this has to do with certificate of participation?
No.
Go ahead.
I would just say, Matt Peddler with School Facility Consultants. We work with the County Office of Education on their funding submittals. I'm not aware of that item. I don't see it as having a relation to the appeal. The county office goes through their 6-month fiscal reviews and opens up their books to OPSC to evaluate their funds available. That happens every 6 months. It's been happening every 6 months for the last 10 years. That's, in my mind, for a different forum, if OPSC thinks there's some funding available to contribute towards project, I'm sure the county's happy to discuss OPSC with OPSC as they go through that process.
Okay, I guess my bigger point is this, on the one hand, I want to support the motion. On the other hand, you've been funded for 16 projects, and there should be some understanding of what's covered under a planning grant and what's covered under construction. And for the state, I mean, there are plenty of schools that want hardship money that have these problems, and for a state to continue to fund planning grants for projects that never come to fruition, I think is a problem.
And I guess if I could just speak to that quickly, again, I think there's two different cost expenditures, and they're distinct. I think the first is related to the legal fees on the due diligence for planning for the site. The county office experience in the past is those types of costs have been allowed, and actually there were several where those were allowed. The second, I think that there's maybe a misunderstanding on what exactly that construction management expense is. I think typically when you hire a construction manager, many folks think that's actually to manage the construction when you've got somebody out there already swinging hammers. In this case, the county office was looking at a lease-back delivery, and in those situations, you bring a team together in an effort to work on the planning process collectively, and part of that was bringing a construction manager to bring the construction perspective. So it wasn't, in our mind, jumping the gun, because they were providing pre-construction, as is allowed in the regulation, services for that purpose.
So But what's not clear to me is why you're providing pre-construction services before you actually own or have title or an agreement to take title of a building.
Well, I think that, I think these timelines all kind of run parallel to each other, and the county office in good faith was moving forward with the project and believed they were going to be able to secure the site. As such, they were going down their planning process. They hired an architect to do a conceptual schematic. They started working with consultants and legal to set up the process by which they'd move that project forward. Unfortunately, kind of in the 11th hour, I think they weren't able to get the seller to sell the property, and it's still sitting there, in fact, not sold. But they were gearing up to move, do everything they could to move the project
And I have
forward.
sympathy with the other district pulling the school out from under you, and I know there's all problems with the NIMBYism and everything. So could you explain to me exactly what services the construction contractor provided then?
The CM was selected for pre-construction. Sorry. And I don't know, did I say my name earlier? I'm Andrea Sullivan. The RF, we did a request for proposals for CM services for pre-construction items related to the leaseback. That person was a part of the team to help us establish the leaseback agreements and negotiations, and would inform us as to what market conditions are, what else is going in there as far as getting even to a price. And so it was really setting up and getting to far enough to understand and have that available when we
And so what services were the legal fees for? What were they?
They were for the selection of the construction management that provided pre-construction services.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get some things put in a little more perspective. We just had our last appeal that had 1,100 students. How many is Orange County? How many students do you have in your district?
In the county office, about 9,000 students.
9,000 students? Mm-hmm. And you're looking for facilities throughout the county of Orange, and I know, just representing part of that county, I do know how the market crash went from projections. We have the same problems in my other parts of my district, Inland Empire too. When we're gearing up for the housing boom, we were looking at a lot of different sites as we expected a lot more home construction, a lot more people moving in. Our 10-year projection we were doing is way off now, so we're through many of our school projects, and all of a sudden there's no houses, there's no students, even though the school district was trying to prepare for that. We do obviously want to be very fiscal sound with our dollars, and I think we all can agree. First of all, let's take back the 1.5 million back that you don't need right now, get it back in circulation, and then so we're talking about the 40 whatever thousand at this point. On your previous projects, you said you had some other projects that these expenses were categorized and were basically paid for, even though the projects didn't go through. Is that correct? And I don't know if I have your paperwork and stuff. I haven't had a chance to go over it with our staff to say what's different about previous jobs versus this job. And if there is a consensus on this board this morning or this afternoon, Mr. Chair, I mean, first of all, I'll support Ms. Moore's motion. Okay, but if there is problems, then I think one the option B could do is let's agree to take back the 1.5, get that in circulation, and then kind of do apples and apples comparisons. And if we establish a process to accept certain charges in the past, then we should be consistent. And you're large enough school districts that you have done this, so if there has been patterns we have established and possibly in our future or past administration stuff, either we have to clarify that or we should be consistent with paying those charges. So that's just my 2 cents worth, Mr. Chairman.
I have Ms. Moore, then I have Ms. Brownlee.
Ms. Brownlee first.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I would also support the motion, and I do believe that our regulations don't spell out very specifically what are eligible costs and ineligible cost. It seems to me that there is certainly justification from Orange County and other districts that similar costs have been justified under this design apportionment monies. I had honestly not very familiar with this leaseback process, but now that I understand it, I think that I understand the connectivity between a construction manager and that process. So for those reasons, I would support the motion.
I'll just reiterate the motion to approve items 1 and 3 for approval for support of the school, of the County Office of Education.
Second.
Well, it has been seconded by Mr. Hagman.
Just a clarification, the motion, so I understood the motion, so this background area where it has these 3 different paragraphs, Ms. Moore, is that what we're looking at?
Okay, help me out. I would...
Page 97, I'm sorry.
I would move approval of the legal fees delineated in item 1.
On page 97 there.
And item 3 for approval by the board. Is that better?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were looking at the right numbers.
And Mr. Hagman, second that. I do have a question. This was meant to be a lease back. Who builds it?
We would go through a process to select a builder.
Can this money be used for this, Ms. Silverman?
Not real clear. One?
Would the lease back be an appropriate use?
Sure. Yes. And actually, in more recent years, lease back has been more prevalent and used by districts, particularly in Northern California, and has been accepted as a delivery method. So there are projects that are being funded using that process. It's an alternative to the traditional design bid build, and districts have been very successful using that model. And so it's consistent. The Ed Code section provides for that.
This delivery method has been an issue, and staff's position has been to direct school districts to consult with their legal counsel to, if they go into this delivery method, to make sure that they're abiding by the public contract code. So we've been advising them to work with their legal counsel to see if they're abiding by all laws.
Which are the very costs that are at question here.
Mr. Harvey.
I don't want to make it too simple, but staff, if they had applied for the design and site acquisition, this would not be before us.
That would take care of issue number 1 on page 97.
And if take care of 2 or 3?
It would not take care of 2. 3 would come into play if they went to a full grant.
2/3 of this wouldn't be before us. Thank you.
So I'd like to ask this, because you can tell I've got that level of frustration here, and I can support this, but I'd like to ask that staff come back with, maybe we put on a future agenda a discussion, because when you talk about hardship dollars, they're very limited, and I think, there should be some kind of criteria where you do your planning and then you do your pre-construction or construction, but, we shouldn't be spending dollars on phases 2, 3, or 4 if we don't have phase 1 done, and if that's not clear, we need to make it clear. I also don't know what to do about the situation where you have 16 planning grants and only 3 that are realized, because that's also money that's, it's not a very good batting average, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but if we're spending money, if we're giving out money and we're not eventually getting classrooms, there's something that's wrong with that process. So I would ask that we either bring it back for discussion or have staff bring it back or whatever, but the process needs to be improved because we have very limited dollars. We're never going to be able to fund all the hardship, and we can't afford to fund projects that aren't going to come. I know in this, it's not your fault that the district pulled the agreement out from under you because people in the community protested the proposed use of the school. But at the same time, I don't want to see us continuing to go down this road because it's not the way I believe we should be spending hardship dollars.
Okay. Ms. Hancock.
Yeah, just in regard to that, I'm assuming that Orange County is a hardship just because it's a county office of education. I think really we ought to look at changing that.
And I think this is the issue, Ms. Hancock. One of the issues that this came about is that the conversation was, the hardship issue and what is, you brought this up, and we've had conversations about the Constitution versus government code that says that counties aren't able to issue bonds, and there's a reality, can they really issue bonds when you have 9,000 students countywide? Can you really issue bonds to pay for that and so forth? And this came about because I was asking the question, what else is out there? There always hardship. And staff said, there is this COP where they have some money, but it's not considered part of the district contribution to a hardship case. And that's an action that this board took back in 2002 and said the money that sits on this certificate of participation shall not be considered district contribution. So perhaps this is something that the board ought to reconsider, that when somebody's sitting on several millions of dollars and they're applying for hardship for limited resources, to set aside money basically almost 10 years ago, we may want to relook at that and consider when we're providing hardship dollars out. I would say yes. Okay. So that's a different issue, and I concur with Ms. Moore that this is a different conversation that we need to have. But this is where this came from when we were asking the question, what resources are out there for folks? But at this point, the issue before us is we have a motion to approve the districts, but you're right, we do need to consider and go back and have the conversation.
I agree, and one of the things that a variance, which is what all these appeals basically are, brings up is what kind of precedent are we setting? And I would really like to know that, because if we are we going to see this kind of thing again? And I do look at what the incentives are for people kind of moving ahead without having all the ducks lined up, because if there's no consequences for that, I believe that was an issue in another appeal too. I mean, how does it play out? Because I have to say, I was not aware of the statistic that Assemblymember Buchanan gave us, but 10 out of 16 isn't a good ratio. And how many tax dollars?
3 out of 16.
3 out of 16, right. How many tax dollars are we spending on this? And is there anything in this motion that lends itself to districts feeling that it's okay to do that? Take a flyer, because in the end, it'll be state money if we're hardship, because it's 100% state money. It isn't even any of our own people's money on the line.
And I think that's the main concern for some of us on the board, that because it is state money only, it's 100% state money, the districts don't have, to use the colloquial, skin in the game. And versus when they do 50-50, then there is some of that money at risk on whatever action's taken. But that's a different conversation. But I concur with your concerns about the precedent setting. On the other hand, do we want to encourage districts to come in and ask for the full pot from the get-go and then not move forward and not only tie it $1.5 million, but tie up, $12 million?
I would say there should be a policy that they can't, that you have to do your planning and be able to get the land before you do the site acquisition, before you get the other, that we should not be tying up large sums of money.
Mr. Hagman and Ms. Moore?
I just want to make sure when we talk about policy, apples and oranges, when you're dealing with a school district, one or two communities, you know pretty well. When you're dealing with a county, especially large counties of millions and millions of people of population, and you're dealing with local jurisdictions that you don't know that well, and you have those political battles, I think there's differences there that you have to be aware of. But we could definitely bring it up for discussion in the future. But one of the things I was just thinking back of my head is, X amount, percentage of your own skin in the game, 25% for planning, but if you actually do completion, you actually go through the project, you get that reimbursed or something. Something where you don't have people making a jobs program out of it at the same time that it is by the code, 100% financed by us, but maybe if you fail multiple times, then you do have some kind of penalty on it. But
Senator Runner?
Yes, also with this motion, and if it goes through, then they're able to reapply for another.
They have that option.
Yes.
They do have that option.
Okay, thank you.
There's more.
Clearly, however, if this motion is granted, the district will be deducted the ADA that represents the $40,000. So the state would not be paying for that ADA ever again. The district has to take that and also not have a project or have those students represented. So there is that wholeness that remains, but it doesn't address the issue that board members have concerns about, and that is there any incentive to be very careful on the projects that a county office of education comes forward with. I think that's for a different day, because in my mind, this district has adhered to what we have heretofore on how districts proceed with projects. We haven't been down in the weeds of really second-guessing school districts in terms of who they bring on when, because ultimately, if the project had perfected, that works itself out in the end. If we really want to get into that level of detail, I think it's something that we should discuss as a board, and then school districts have the knowledge of that's going to be the lay of the land. But it's easy to question in hindsight that you shouldn't have done something at a certain stage when county office of education and school districts are dealing in a very complex world of, am I going to do lease back? Am I going to do design bid build? When am I going to acquire the land? Who's my architect? Who's my appraiser? I mean, there's a lot of decisions that they make at that level, and it's easy to second guess that now. But ultimately, these costs would have been, with the exception of one, would have been allowed at the end. It had all worked out, and we wouldn't have been talking about it. So I would hope that the board would support the district on this issue, and if we want to take a greater look at how we proceed in the future, I think that's a good discussion to have.
Senator Lowenthal, and then Ms. Buchanan.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just want to echo what Assemblymember Hagman. I think county offices of education have unique challenges, different than regular school districts. These are, people come out of the woodwork. They do not like these kinds of, community schools in their district because they don't want. And so they're presented with difficult challenges that most school districts do not have the variety of. So I think that when we're doing this, we have to also appreciate just the difficulties that county offices of education have in setting up community schools, because most communities say, I don't want it in my community.
Okay. Ms. Buchanan.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
We've talked about smaller amounts of this when we've done material inaccuracies for districts that have falsely certified that they were ready. So in terms of the dollar amount, it's easy just to say, well, it's only so many dollars. It's also, I think Senator Hancock also brings up a good point, because if this comes up again, another district will say, well, you okayed this as a pre-planning expense. So I'm comfortable somewhat with moving forward as Ms. Moore suggested, but I do think it is imperative that we take a look at what we're doing, and particularly, I agree with Senator Hagman, when you're not spending your own dollar, it does make a difference. And yes, it's better that you don't tie up all $6 million, but I would say that money should never have been tied up till you acquired the site anyway. And I would like us to have that discussion on how we move forward, and what's allowable or not allowable, and how long we even allow hardship funds to be tied up. 6 years to me is too long for a project anyway, and because we have too many schools that need this.
Ms. Silverman, just one last question. Have there been other issues that have been resolved administratively that have not risen to the board level on this particular?
Yes.
So this is the 3 remaining issues of how many?
Yeah, it was probably, I would guess, about 10, Andrea, is that correct? Somewhere in the area of 10 items that we were actually working with the district.
So the stuff that gets elevated to the board is stuff that can't be resolved. So it's not like everything where you have disputes are coming up to us.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we did our best to work with Orange County for the last year and a half, 2 years. The project got funded back in 2005, but there was also an extension in play that they asked to extend before they rescind the project. I mean, they was hoping that they had the ability to move that project along. They did request that through the board, and likewise, we're here today. So we've been having these conversations for a while.
We're down to the less than $50,000.
Yes.
I wondered if there was a way to add to the motion some clarifying language that this is not a precedent, because I can see someone's going to be sitting here 5 years, if there's any school bond money at all, and it will be a precedent.
That's my concern too, Ms. Hancock. That is the precedent. This is what people look to, but this is what the board does too, though. So I share your concerns.
Let's just do the motion, but I think that's something that we could talk about, different ways of doing it. We have a whole list of them now. By the time we run out of money, we'll be experts at it. Let's start all over again. But as far as different ways to incentivize, you've seen school districts been very fiscal sound and have extra money, how they get to keep it or spell it, build new things, all these different kind of after-project ideas now that we will become experts on. And if we ever get a break, we can work on it.
I think the reason Senator Hancock wants it in the motion is because if anyone refers back to this action, it'll be clear to them in the future.
But is the decision that we can't include it in the motion?
It's up to the person who made the motion, or if you want to make a substitute motion.
We have had testimony that this isn't the first time that these costs have been allowed in rescinded projects. So I actually think the precedent has already been set, and that I don't know what the words of saying this is not a precedent would have an effect on a future motion necessarily. I'd like to take the vote on the motion, and then if we want to direct staff on how we might want to proceed in the future, I think that's entirely appropriate.
So could we just have Ms. Silverman comment on whether or not we have?
I'm not sure if we actually clarified that point. I know they would actually want us to look back at those projects. I would prefer to go back and look at those projects to see whether or not those allowances were provided.
Or that has been audited.
Or it has been audited in the past, because I would hate to say that, yes, it has, or no, it hasn't, when I'm not really clear it has or hasn't.
Yeah, this is only surfaced because of the audit.
Right.
Ms. Farrar, you've been sitting there patiently for a while. Let me think. I think you support the district's request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ana Ferreira, County School Facilities Consortium, very much in support of Orange County's appeal and of the remarks that Member Moore and Member Lowenthal have made. County offices have a very difficult time setting these schools, although they are students of the districts of their region. And we are in support, and we are very concerned about the precedent it sets, because we believe that pre-construction is the magic phrase. I mean, we are very concerned that this is something that will be disallowed in the future and prevent county offices from doing due diligence and taking up more funds than they need to before they're prepared to go to that step. So we would be very much in support. We welcome a discussion, and not all county offices are financial hardship. And that's...
Okay, so you're opposite from Senator Hancock. You want to keep it as broad as possible in terms of what pre-construction is.
We would simply say that that's what the regulations state at this time, and that we would want to make sure that the message that we're sending is that due diligence is encouraged, and that it's not the line, it's depending on where the line is set, and if we need to discuss what that is, then we welcome that discussion. But I would say that I'm not seeking to broaden anything. I'm just trying to make you aware that it is difficult. Orange County is an urban area. That brings with it all kinds of issues with finding sites that are suitable. not to mention the communities that we serve. And so we would just welcome a chance to talk about that a little more.
Senator Hancock.
I'm sorry, I thought all county offices were hardship because they weren't allowed to bond.
County offices may say that, when it gets to the point where you're asking to receive financial hardship status, county offices can skip a step because they aren't allowed to receive developer fees and the bond issue that we talked about. And so
the bond issue, you mean they're not able to issue bonds?
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's already reasons why county offices are considered, can just apply for financial hardship and receive it, but they're not all financial hardship by nature.
Okay, and what do counties do that don't apply for financial hardship? They get developer fees? How did they get money?
I think that's probably a question for the policy discussion.
Okay, but you know that there are some?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you know how they get money?
Well, no, we don't know. Kern County Office of Education has never applied for hardship, and there's probably maybe just less than a handful of county offices that haven't applied for hardship dollars. Very few.
There's not many. I will.
Are they entering in construction? Are they paying for it out of their general fund, or are they just not?
Not real
Just because
clear.
they haven't applied doesn't mean that they wouldn't be if they needed to do construction.
Right. And they would be pre-qualified because they are a county office of education, right?
Not to have the whole discussion here, but I also know that Kern County is able to do some really interesting and terrific joint projects with other entities like courts and, that aren't allowed under financial hardship, and other areas may not have that. They're also land rich. They have, more property available to them. So there may be a number of reasons why county offices are able to do. Some county offices are able to do it without financial hardship. Others, for the most part, are financial hardship. I just wanted to clear that.
Okay. All right. Senator Hancock, I share your concerns of precedent setting. Please call the roll.
Senator Lowenthal.
Aye.
Senator Hancock. Senator Renner.
Aye.
Assemblymember Brownlee.
Aye.
Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman.
Aye.
Scott Harvey.
No.
Kathleen Moore.
Aye.
Pedro Reyes.
No.
Carries.
No, it doesn't. What are the numbers?
No,
I'm sorry.
fails.
I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Thank you.
What was the vote?
It was 5-2-1.
Okay. Mr. Harvey.
One last word on the handout. I am taken with recommendation number 2, and again, when appropriate, I think this kind of item is worthy of some board oversight or discussion. It says that the school district contribute to their SFP financial hardship projects any lease funding in excess of the COP payments, including reasonable maintenance costs. It sounds like, if I heard this $18 million figure, that they may or may not be doing so, and I don't know if there are other districts out there that have obligations to contribute to their construction programs if they have other sources of money. But it might be interesting to ensure that folk are following up on the commitments they make.
Right. Right.
That's the point. So, again, in the future with the chairs...
an item for discussion. Thank you. Item 12, additional grant for general site development.
That was held over. You held over on that item.
Oh, it's going to...
Yeah.
Is this going to be held over?
It was agendized. We just pulled it off the consent, so it has
Right.
been agendized. So we
Right.
can still
discuss
take
it
it
now.
up, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll take it up now.
The general site regulations will expire January 1st, 2012. So this item is basically to extend them for another year, as has been the past practice for the board, so that they will set to expire January 1st, 2013. Just a little bit of background, general site. This was part of an ad hoc group discussion that was performed back in 2006. There was some concerns that the school facility program grants, when the transition was made from the lease purchase program grants, that they didn't include general site amounts. So there was some discussions, and because at that time there wasn't a full conclusion whether they were included or not, the board adopted these regulations to be adopted annually until staff did some more work to evaluate the full grant adequacy discussion. Also, at that time, the Assembly Bill 127 had just been chaptered, although the ballot hadn't been approved yet in November. So there was also the bill that had some changes in terms of evaluating the grant amounts. So that was a part of the discussion that the board had. Let's approve this annually. Let's wait for that discussion to happen, and then we'll see if we do it on a permanent basis. There has been some reports that have been submitted, presented to the board, that the board has not adopted in regards to grant adequacy. So this discussion, the full analysis on grant adequacy, hasn't been adopted by the board. That's why it's been still on an ongoing annual basis. So this item is just to approve it for January 12th to be set to expire January 1st, 2013.
Okay.
So moved.
Been moved and second. Questions? We had testimony earlier, so we're done with that. Okay.
Can I ask a procedural
Sure.
question? Can we seek reconsideration of an issue once it's been voted on?
Could you be more specific? You're talking about an issue we voted on this evening.
Yes.
I don't think we have a process for that.
We don't have anything in process, but we are still in session.
What did they say? I can't remember that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, one moment. Let me take a look myself.
Well, again, back to my suggestion on the last item, Mr. Chair, I had the alternative, even though I supported the motion, that we authorize staff to bring back the $1.5 million, and you have that $40,000 you're still talking about, and bring an item-by-item comparison that the district represented, but the staff hasn't had a chance to respond to, then we could bring it up at the next meeting and actually see if it's apples and apples or oranges and oranges.
Well, at this point, based on the denial of the appeal, then the entire amount just comes back up, right? So the issue's been resolved, so it comes back up.
I'm sorry, what's that?
No, the denial of appeal, basically the staff recommendation stands, which is to deny their billing for the 44.
Correct, and then the $1.5 million then comes back.
Okay, so we don't need to move forward.
So that would be, that's, right, no? Correct me.
We're having a lot of discussion on item 12 that would relate to the previous.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we had the motion.
Okay. Well, it was the
second on 12.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, in our rules, Section 10, we do have reconsideration of regulations or interpretations. Well, not, okay. On the day in which a vote has been recorded on any item, a motion to reconsider the vote may be made by any board member, and reconsideration may be granted only once. And this was on the rules that the board adopted, I believe, last year.
Can you tell us the page?
Have I got the wrong version?
Well,
Ms. Hancock, I thought you had this committed to memory.
All right, so here we go. Let me take control. Let me take control of our meeting back. Let's dispense with item 12 and then come back to your question, since we're in the middle of item 12 now.
And what has been moved on 12?
It has been moved, and the staff recommendation of the 1 year.
And I would just like to go back to Senator Lowenthal's comments earlier to say that, I don't understand, we're pretty much, down to a zero balance as it is. Why can't we just go ahead and extend this for the time period as opposed to just continuing to come back on a year-by-year basis? But I think we're talking.
What is we can do it year by year. We can do it for another 5 years. We can do it in perpetuity. What is the downside of doing?
Are we going to really come back and revisit this issue? I don't think so. Not until we have a new bond.
Well, if you remember, this was a consent, so it wasn't really a lot of discussion. It was just going to go all through until it got pulled out. So we weren't really going to spend a lot of time on it.
I see.
Except that people decided to spend time on it.
That's okay, isn't it?
That's
fine.
We pulled it off consent.
Yeah. So, to say that we go on and on every year, it's really, we wouldn't have. We just would have done it, and automatically next year, if appropriate, would have just extended it for another year.
I see what you're saying.
So we had this conversation because people chose to have the conversation, but we didn't have to. So now we're in the middle of the conversation. Oh, no, madam, no, I would never do that. No, I apologize.
We actually have about $250 million in new construction dollars, just to put a number to our action. So just wanted to highlight that to the board. And if we extend it for a year, then obviously that may cover us through next year, which we may not have new construction bond authority at the end of next year. So it may be kind of self-resolves itself in the end.
I would just enter into the argument, I'm sorry, not the argument, but to the discussion that having sat through 5 different times that we have, I think it's 5 now, that we have increased the grant amount for general site, which was believed to have been an omission from the transition of this program from lease purchase to the program that it is today. And having seen that and know that the general site amount is readily used by school districts and has been a very long-standing and appropriate amount, I would support a permanent vote on this, and lacking that, obviously support the annual.
Make it permanent.
Okay, so I have a permanent.
And I just have one question. Are we saying permanent forever or permanent till these bond funds are expended? So can we amend it?
Till the bonds are expended.
All right.
I would rather have till forever and ever.
I think that aren't our regulations, however, not specific to bond measures. Our regulations are in place, and when we run out of money, we run out of money, but our regulations stand. So if we approve this, it would not be tied to a bond measure, correct?
That's correct.
And I'm just asking if it's not prudent when you have a new bond measure to have some kind of trigger there where you're reviewing them, which is why I would be more comfortable supporting a measure for the existing bond.
Could we amend it?
We have a motion, and we can amend anything we want. At this point, I think from my perspective, it'd be cleaner to have for a time certain, and then we can come back and amend if we have to, or adjust if we have to. I think that to leave it in perpetuity, it will come back to haunt us when somebody else says, I thought they were the rules of the game, and you chose to change them. So this way, everybody's under notice that those are the rules of the game. You want to do it for the next 3 years, or the next 5 years, and then if the bonds aren't there, then it is what it is. But at least we're not committing ourselves in perpetuity. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah, I totally remember the bill and I don't think we have to do it for perpetuity. I think we can just say to request adoption of an amendment to the school facility program to extend the expiration of the additional grants to general site development, or to permanently extend the expiration for all existing bonds, or something like that, just to say it, just like that. So what we're doing is we're permanently extending the expiration of additional grants for general site development for all existing bonds. And that leaves it for only existing bonds.
For all existing bonds now, or next year when we have other bonds issued?
Existing is now.
Those are future.
Hold on, though.
But you can specify 47, you can specify if you need to.
When you read the regulations, though, and they will say for all existing bonds in 10 years from now.
So let's identify the bonds, that's fine.
The regulations don't apply to new bonds.
They will.
They said they do.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yeah, they're not bond-specific.
Yeah, they will.
Oh, they're...
So in 10 years, the existing bonds would be the existing bonds.
So let's just identify the bonds. For 1D, 47, Proposition 47, Proposition 1, whatever the bonds that we have money for.
Make substitute motion.
How about for 2 years, because we'll be out of money by then, for sure.
That's fine.
Second. Okay, we have a substitute motion, so we are now on the substitute motion. It's been moved and seconded. We've seen some yes.
This is fine.
Please call the roll.
Senator Lowenthal.
On the substitute motion for 2 years.
Senator Hancock.
Aye.
Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore.
Aye.
Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you. This was going to be an easy one. All right. Reports. Senator Hancock, how are we doing on time? You have some conflicts, and I lost Senator Runner. I'm trying to figure out if this is the best time to do the closed session issue or go through the informational issue.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. How to do that motion?
Mr. Hagman.
I'm sorry to bring this back up, but I'm going to go back to item number 10 if we can, because
I'm sorry, yes.
we did have 5 members, as far as I'm aware.
Can we reconsider that motion?
Yeah, just reconsider, or my substitute motion is, let's take back the money so it's not sitting around, let them compare their two different
I think
things.
we have to reconsider first to do that, before you can do a if we've already passed that motion.
Well, the motion failed, so there's no motion, no action was taken at this point.
So we don't have to...
So there's no reconsideration. It just didn't pass. The only motion there was to adopt, to give them the money. That was the motion, but it failed because actually I think we need 6 voting members, even though the majority voted aye for it, we don't have enough members.
But I think, if I might, if we did have reconsideration with an amendment to that regarding the precedent, I think then it passes. And so they get their money and we just declare it not a precedent. So I think that's really why we wanted reconsideration.
Can I make a motion then to include the previous aforementioned items 1 and 3 on the legal costs with the stipulation that this is not a precedent?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Back to item 10. Do you have the motion? Okay.
Senator Lowenthal.
Aye.
Senator Hancock.
Aye.
Assemblymember Brownlee.
Yeah. Aye.
Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey.
No.
Kathleen Moore.
Aye.
Pedro Reyes.
No.
Carries.
Thank you. Okay. And so that will resolve the issue and bring in the money that they have, right? Okay. Thank you. Reports and discussions. Item 13, public information worksheet data. We don't have Senator Runner, so let's give her a few more minutes. It's only 4 o'clock, and Senator Hancock has to leave around 5, so we can move forward. Is that okay? Okay.
Came out fine. No rule. And now we have 4. We have double note.
Good afternoon, Brian Odell, OPSC, and with me is Josh Damath, OPSC, and we're here to present the report, Program Statistics, Project Information Worksheet Data, which is found in tab 13 of the agenda. And the purpose of the report is to present some of the unique information that's collected on the Project Information Worksheet. In each agenda from here on out, there will be some information presented in form of a graphic or a chart that shows information derived from the Project Information Worksheet. The information today is based on 567 new construction projects that have been received since 2008, and it represents 84% of all of the new construction projects apportioned since 2008. The worksheet is only for new construction projects, and it's submitted 3 times during the life of a project. The first is when funds are released. The second time is 1 year later, along with the expenditure report. And finally, when the district submits the final project expenditure report. So at that point, it's actual numbers, and nothing is estimated. It collects information that's unique. It's not captured on other SAB forms, such as project modifications due to cost, local requirements that weren't funded through the school facility program, and also local contribution to the project that's beyond the required local match. And in the future, we know that the PIW was recently modified to start collecting data regarding the high performance incentive grant. And so as information from those projects start to come through, we'll be able to provide information about those as well. So as a result, the PIW provides the board and taxpayers the ability to see the result of the construction bonds. For example, of the 567 projects today, provided over 240,000 new seats for California students. And options are being developed to make this data more accessible to the public. For example, we would have the ability to post these charts and graphics on the OPSC website, and also the governor's strategic growth and bond accountability website. And looking a little bit down the road, we hope to be able to provide interactive reports on the website where someone could go to the website and put in some filters and create their own data that's useful to them based on the project information worksheet. On page 109, there's a graphic there that shows the state of California, and it's a breakdown of pupils housed and the square feet constructed according to DSA region. So it shows the total pupils housed in each region, as well as the total square footage from all of the 567 projects. On the next page, 110, there are three different graphics, and the map in the middle shows the total permanent square footage in each region, and also the percentage of projects that were entirely permanent. So it's not a mixture, some were permanent, some were modular. This is entirely permanent new construction projects. And then in the box to the right, it shows, it's a little different. That's only based on the classrooms. So it shows 69% of the projects, the classrooms were entirely permanent. Now, there could have been an admin facility or something else, maybe part of the other resource rooms that would be a portable, but the classrooms themselves were permanent. 16% were modular, that's the prefab type of construction. 11% were portable, and then 4% were mixed construction types for the same project.
I have a question. How detailed can you drill down on this? Can you drill down to a county level? You have it by district, state architect, but can you go down to county?
Yes, we can provide that. By county, district level, anything that people would be interested in finding, that would be easy.
Ms. Moore.
I have a question, too. What instruments are you using to record and analyze the data? So is it a what kind of database is it?
The information is gathered now online, and so it's all electronic, submitted by the districts, and then it's then exported into Excel. And this information here isn't filtered. It's just the totals at the bottom of each column.
So it goes from an online input to an Excel spreadsheet that then produces that then you produce reports out of the Excel spreadsheet?
That's correct.
As opposed to a database that seems to be a more normed way of coming from the Department of Education, where data is pretty crucial. We go through a lot around our databases, and so always whenever there's a question, we are questioned on the database, its methodology, how it calcs, who's the inputter, where's the checks and balances, has the work been reviewed, all those kinds of things. And I'm just knowing that there's some desire to put this out into the public arena and actually have it be able to be manipulated, as you indicated, or in a good way, utilized. I think it's it's incumbent upon us that that we're very careful around that, and that that we have approached it in the manner that we approach all most databases in California, so that we're consistent with how that reporting goes out, because it will be utilized all the time, as is the Department of Education's databases, are the Department of Finance's databases.
May I? This is self-reported information, and all the staff was trying to do is grab that information that's available. Although we don't have a sophisticated database, I wish we did, we just provide that information, upload it to, and this is the end result. So, I mean, I don't think we're not making revisions. We're just taking the raw data and populating to create some graphics.
And also,
But the recommendation in here, the idea in here is that this information will be made publicly available and be manipulative, or be able to be manipulated. That, to me, is a level of public access that demands that the data have checks and balances. And that's why I asked about what the database is and those kinds of things. It's great to have data, but there's all kinds of protocols around data that I'm wondering how we're approaching that.
The charts before us today, I was talking, we export it to Excel. That's how we created the charts. But it does start off from a true database. That was just how we chose for this particular assignment. For the interactive, that would have IT people would be better, to answer that question. But it would be, they wouldn't be doing it from Excel, I wouldn't think so. So I appreciate those concerns, but we would use something very different for that piece.
So would this, if we are, this isn't an action item, right?
No, just...
So it's information, and I would ask that if we are going to be placing the data out into the public arena, that we have a discussion about that at the board, and how, so that we're comfortable with how that operates. Obviously, this is a public arena. The data is available. It's been placed into the worksheets. But as everyone knows, this has been an issue that has been of contention for a long time. So I think it's really important that how we approach the reporting out to the public. And we also know that it's self-reported in. Are there ways, if a district determines that they didn't self-report correctly, which we also have at the Department of Education, is there procedures for you can resubmit or update your information? Is it static in time? Those kinds of questions are what I would have if we move to have a system that's readily available and manipulative in the public arena.
Mr. Harvey.
Consistent with what I said during the executive officer's report, I hope at some point, too, you give us the pros and cons and the costs of adding to what this information data is, so that we learn and see pictorially what modernization is looking like and how it's expended and so forth. And also, I think you heard during that same discussion, is there a way of breaking down, either on the form itself or the data you give us, a better idea what the other category is? And I think over time, we'd like to hear about that as well.
Okay. Mr. Buchanan.
And I would just, I know that I'm sure there are some school districts who don't like having to fill out these forms, but I think when we're talking about asking the public to approve significant amounts of money for school construction, that this just adds a layer of accountability, and I think it also provides us on the board, and I hopefully staff, valuable information in terms of where we're spending our money and, the types of classrooms we're building, whether they're permanent or modular or whatever. So, and I believe the more data we have, the better decisions we make. So I really appreciate what's been done here, and recognizing that there may be some schools that don't categorize things perfectly, but that happens pretty much in every report you get. Hopefully we can make that as easy as possible as well. Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please have a seat.
Right there. Hi, Tova Corman, Santa Ana Unified School District. In the limited resource, the time of limited resources in our school district, budget cuts and everything, really concerned with the time allocation of our staff. So when we have additional work, such as the PIW, we have to allocate resources that we don't really have at this point in time. So it's an additional workload element that concerns me for my accountants, as well as coordination back and forth with the various architects and CMs and so on and so forth, as well as additional review time from myself and our assistant superintendent. So given the times and financial crises, it's just an additional burden that, is not the best thing for the district at this time. Another concern that I will have as I go through the PIWs when I submit with the 5006 is that there are several different architect firms and CM firms that are giving us information. So they may be extracting different information on square footages, types of classrooms. So even across the same district, you might be getting different numbers, different accuracies on numbers, and they might be counting the interior square footages and things of that nature. So that's a concern that we have. And also creating confusion with the purpose of evaluating square footages and whether or not that translates to the overall intent of supporting a future bond. So.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Next person.
My name is Janet Dixon. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the Riverside Unified School District. And the question has come up a few times from Mr. Harvey as to why we don't have this for modernization. I just want to remind the board that the original purpose of the PIW was to gather information to inform the board as to whether an additional 6% grant increase should be allowed every January. And since that grant increase was only applicable to new construction, the PIW was constructed to gather information on new construction only, when in fact the PIW has never been used for the purpose that it was first intended. As was previously stated, this is actually a very onerous report to fill out. There's some information that is quite a bit of the information is simply a restatement of information that has already been submitted to either CDE, OPSC, or the division of the state architect. And a lot of it has already been gone to OPSC on the 5004, the original application, including number of classrooms, number of students being served, even whether or not it's a reuse of plans. And then we give extremely detailed information, as Ms. Moore stated earlier, on square footages for facilities. That goes to the Department of Education. What's difficult to do is the disaggregation and reaggregation of a lot of the financial data that is requested out of the PIW, and that, in fact, is a portion that's never been used. The PIW is required to be submitted prior to a district getting a fund release. So at the same time, we've gone out to bid, trying to get contracts signed, board items approved, insurance certificates, bond certificates, all the mobilization process. I need to set aside 2 or 3 days to also fill out a PIW in addition to the relatively simple 5005. So it actually becomes an impediment to our getting our fund releases, so the funds don't come as quickly to the district because I need to find this time to set aside. I agree. These charts are amazing. They're really pretty. I really like the ones that have the maps on them. But that data, we don't put anywhere on the PIW, which DSA office we're going through. So that data obviously came from someplace else. And then the other things that are on there, square footages, number of classrooms, are already available from other information that we've already turned into OPSC. So my heart sinks that you would want to make us do something like this on modernizations as well, because as district staffs have been reduced, the time becomes more and more precious to everybody. So my request would be that you look at not using the PIW, but maybe look at using some of the data that has already been submitted to the various agencies if you want to continue to look at this information in a pictorial manner. And I can see why you want to do that. It's interesting and it's nice to see it graphically, but please don't make districts fill out a PIW in order to get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lyle?
Thank you, Lyle Smoot, Los Angeles Unified. I always hate to go last because I don't like to be redundant, and so now I have to restructure what I was going to say to not say it again. Yeah, can I just say ditto? No, I want to add that, like Ms. Moore has said, this has been a contentious form right from the start for a number of reasons. For LA, we couldn't see the value of it because, like the prior witnesses said, most of this information is already there. It's already available in the files. It's just a matter of, and I'm not inside, so I don't know, but I think it's just a matter of a program that says pick out this, pick out that. And plus the added problem of this is subjective information on this form, whereas on other forms it wouldn't be nearly as subjective. It would be more likely to be accurate. Like, for instance, an expenditure report is pretty detailed, and you go through a lot of energy to make an expenditure report, and then this comes along and says, what did the project cost? Well, it isn't as simple as just saying it, it's this or that. In addition, when the board adopted this form, the stated purpose in the agenda, there was three purposes. One was going to provide information to determine grant adequacy, the 6% issue of AB 127. Two, there was a term called it's going to be used for bond accountability. No explanation of what that means, still don't know. And three, it was going to be used to report on bid climates. None of those things have actually happened, at least not successfully. So we've gone through a utilization of this form for 3.5 years now and haven't seen anything in terms of answering those three questions. Now, this is a very pretty report that's in here today. I agree with Janet. It's pretty. It's got nice charts and everything. It doesn't answer a single one of those questions. It doesn't address any of those stated issues. I want to tell you, we were trying to figure out what it costs us to prepare this form. We believe about $500 per preparation, and there's three of them. So that adds $1,500 to each project. Just to put that in perspective, for the 567 projects that were used for today, that cost districts depending on whether they use the first report or all three, between $300,000 and $1 million to provide this data that's already available in your files. So I would ask that you have a real serious discussion. Excuse me, Mr. Harvey, but I don't think this form is valuable to the board. The information's already there. If it isn't there, it'd be a simple matter to add it to the various forms that you already have in place and have the staff glean it. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess you were not last, Lyle.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, good.
Mr. Duffy.
Mr. Chairman, members.
Hold on, Tom.
Yes.
Senator Hancock.
I'll make my comment after Mr. Duffy.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Tom Duffy for Cash. You've heard, I think, a good deal of good information. One of the suggestions that was made was that you have this information already available to you. Something that was put in place last year, Mr. Harvey, was the Memorandum of Understanding with General Services, DSA, OPSC, and CDE. It seems to me that through that memorandum and the information that the three agencies have, you could glean the same information, and I think you heard that from Ms. Dixon, the same information from the information that is in-house at those three agencies. And you could look at new construction, you could look at modernization, you could look at the emergency repair program, and not have that burden simply on districts for the one program, the new construction program. As Mr. Smoot noted for you, and I think it was noted by Janet Dixon as well, when this was put in place, it was put in place to do one thing, and that was to inform the grant increase to the grant that was established by AB 127. There was a lot of discussion before the board at that time, and I won't go into the history of our involvement, but there was deep involvement of the cash organization trying to support the idea. It's never been used for that purpose. I agree with Ms. Dixon that the information really looks nice, and it certainly provides some information, but having been at the entrails of that document, it's not a highly accurate document. So thank you. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Senator Hancock.
I was just going to indicate that I found actually these charts quite useful. And I think it may be that information is available on some website in a more complicated form. I've actually done some legislation on this in connection with other departments. But is it user-friendly? Is it something a member of the public can access and get information that they might need? And I found these things extremely helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's just an information on Ms. Brownlee.
Well, and I guess, I just wanted to comment that this seems to happen in government generally, is that information is gathered in a number of different places, or required to be gathered in a number of different places where we don't have sort of one universal data gathering point. It sounded like from some of the testimony there is information gathered on one form, transferred to another form. Is there a mechanism by which we can collect the rich data that we need, but try to minimize the amount of time it's requiring school districts to collect it? And so I just asked that question and wonder if we could we look at sort of the efficiencies around collecting the data.
Thank you. Okay, that was just an informational item. We're going on to the next item. Joint Use Fund Release Status Report. Thank you.
Can I grab tab 14, please? On page 112, again, we're just highlighting to the board. We actually did provide some cash to some joint use projects back in October 2010. And with that, the board did apportion 5 projects, and 4 of those projects have been liquidated, and there's still 1 project outstanding. And we understand that school district is actually working with its joint use partner and trying to work out some budget issues with respect to the joint use partner. And so with that, the district did share that they anticipated submitting a fund release in September of 2011. And with that, I would open up to any questions.
Senator Hancock.
Yes, thank you very much. As many of you know, I planned to request the board to consider funding all of the joint use applications on record by transferring available funds from the lease purchase account or any other.
That's the next item.
Well,
okay, but
why
you
should
can talk
it be?
to it because
I actually thought they all sort of
they're sort of
floated.
related. They flow together. That's fine. They flow together. Go ahead.
Unless people want to ask something about this before we move over. I mean, they're both sort of, they flow into one another.
Yeah.
Right? And it seemed to me that because joint use facilities are such an excellent use of the taxpayer's dollar, that it would be something that we should consider. And at the time, there was indications that there was money in the lease purchase account. But now it turns out there is not money in the lease purchase account. And to me, it's a very difficult thing to tell school districts you can have sort of your share of $600,000 and go away or go to the end of the line next time or whatever, or wait until there may be another bond somewhere down the line. So I am hoping, and we've talked with staff a good bit, that perhaps we could identify some additional funds from some other account that could be used for these 6 projects, and we would never necessarily need to go out again. But it's a very Solomon choice to ask districts to agree to take a little bit of money that won't finish the project, and
So we're going to have staff bring any recommendations back?
Yeah, they said they would bring back recommendations. They'd bring back information in August. And what I'd like to just add, kind of with the consent of the board, is that please look and come back and tell us if there's additional monies that we can transfer so that we could fund these 6 projects.
I'm seeing the board say yes.
Of course, I think it's a very healthy and appropriate discussion, but at what point do we get to find out if we're transferring money around and we have only a limited amount, what else could we transfer it to? Because there's some pots that we can transfer as a board, or others we can only do it legislatively. And
I think staff would bring that information forward.
So that information would be part of it. It wouldn't just be specific.
Yes.
So we can look at the whole picture.
There's public comment, sir. Ms. Moore, do you want to go ahead while he takes a seat?
Sure. Well, we certainly would support you at the Department of Education. We feel that joint use is an important program, particularly for communities, and it's a leveraged program, so I think we at the state get good value for that leverage and would support your recommendations, Senator Hempel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm George Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of the Alameda Boys and Girls Club, part of this joint use project. The superintendent of the Alameda School District is away, so I've been designated to speak dually, I guess, tonight. And I wanted to thank you for allowing me to do this. And I just wanted to frame a little bit of our project specifically for you, but I think in light of what I've heard, it sort of reinforces the value of joint use projects. This is a partnership between the Boys and Girls Club and the Alameda Unified School District. Our mission, our only mission, is to serve school-age children with enriching after-school programs, weekends, summer holidays, school breaks. And our partner, the Alameda Unified School District, really has the exact same mission during the school day. The location this project sits on is on school-owned property, and we chose it because it was immediately adjacent to a district-run alternative high school, a charter middle high, another middle school, and a charter elementary school. That's contiguous to the property. Within a few blocks radius, there's another district high school, a district elementary school, and a charter middle school. And forgive me, I should quote the enrollment, but it's several thousand children. The district will schedule use of this facility with any and all of these schools during the school day. Then the Boys and Girls Club will be in a position to serve these children after school, weekends, summer holidays. Because we planned this facility in partnership with the school district and the Boys and Girls Club, we've been able to ensure features that serve both entities well. Our application covers our gymnasium and our fitness center, which certainly will allow the district to run their physical education programs, performing arts, assemblies, etc. There's a few other aspects of this building that, while they aren't in the application, I think are important to know what the scope of these projects can bring to the schools and the communities. We've included a medical and dental screening clinic. So not only will we be able to serve kids with screening, but the alternative high school will use that facility for their school-based health center. We have a commercial kitchen. The school district will use it to serve the daily hot lunch program to the high school and the surrounding schools with children who qualify. We'll use it to serve the same program during the summer. And we'll also use it for the healthy after-school snacks.
Thank you.
There's an 8,000 square foot garden we're installing. The schools will share it for ecology and nutritional programs with the Boys and Girls Club. There's classrooms, there's a technology center, an art room, and meeting rooms that will allow the district to expand whatever educational goals they have with the surrounding schools. I echo the comment I heard earlier that this type of public-private partnership involving, especially this one involving two entities that serve the same clients, is essential to help the schools leverage the somewhat meager resources they're dealing with today. This facility will be offered to children 15 hours a day. So we think it's important. I want to thank OPSC staff. They've worked with us, and we've come down to this final piece, and they've been very helpful and supportive, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I guess I'll sum it up by saying I hope you find a way to find the money to fund these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hancock, do you have?
No, I think we're looking forward to the August report. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank OPSC, too, for trying.
Thank you. Tab 16, tentative workload, is tentative. Big words, tentative. Tab 16, state allocation meeting dates. And then tab 17, we're talking about SFP unfunded list, SFP workload list, emergency repair program unfunded list, emergency repair program workload list, facility hardship rehab approvals without funding. There's no action on any of those. Is there any public comment?
I do have one little comment, as a member. Just that I think the high-performance incentive grants are going to be, program status is going to be on our August 24th
We're looking at tab 16.
meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that will be very interesting. So, but I'd like to suggest for our October meeting that we might have an item regarding solar energy and alternative energy programs, specifically as a standalone, because high-performance schools takes many other things into account. And particularly, what funds and programs are available to districts from different state or utility resources, because there's a variety of programs that are available, and also how we inform districts about the whole array of solar-related monies that they might be able to leverage. I just had an experience with a school in my district. You guys, well, I don't know if some of you are aware of it, but they almost lost a big grant because of delays in the Office of the State Architect and some other things, and the approval process at different times. So I'm curious as to how we were able to work it out in the end, but sort of how we let districts know that they have a variety of options and then get them through the system as quickly as possible so they can use non-state resources when it's appropriate. Would it be okay just to ask?
Staff, is there enough time between now and October to come up with an informational report on that?
Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, Senator, I think some of the issues that you may have had may have been percolated through the process of receiving approvals through the Division of State Architects. So I would like to probably have those conversations with Division of State Architect to see what we can do to facilitate some of those processing issues, because I'm not really in tune with some of those issues itself. So it may be talking outside of my realm of what my abilities to provide.
And the other state agencies you need to coordinate with as well.
I could also offer with the Department of Education. We've had a lot of questions around this issue as well, and we have quantified some of the other areas that there's funding available in, and maybe we could assist you as well as you present that. We'd be happy.
Let's put it on the tentative for now, and then let's see how it develops and what good information we can get, because it wouldn't make sense to have an incomplete report just so that we can meet the October, but I certainly would like to have that information. Ms. Buchanan?
I say that, or depending on how long a discussion, maybe just have a short special hearing on it, because you could probably go for a long time on how different districts have bonded or used power purchase agreements, or there's lots of different examples in the state. So we might want to just have a short special hearing on it and not
I kind of like that idea because that would bring in folks who have actually done it to educate us. I think that'd be kind of an interesting, different hearing, but I think it'd be educational for several folks. So, well, let's see what we can do. I mean, let's keep the options open. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, the board will now hold a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, Subdivision A, Paragraph 1. Lance? My bad.